You're stuck. Hopefully we teach them to plan rather than fill out a form, but it ends up in many cases as a struggle with a piece of paper. Our second presenter is a gentleman who comes to us from Maine, where he has been involved with the Liberty School. A secondary program serves students from 9 to 12. When we take a look at the literature he shared with us, it's impressive in that it says that they focus at the Liberty School on teaching students how to think. Their big question is not what or when, it's rather why. And we appreciate that here at Misericordia in that we've been working with the University of Kansas Institute for Research and Learning on learning strategies and hopefully teaching our future teachers, at least our secondary teachers, to teach students how to learn, how to think, and things of that sort. So I'm really interested in hearing this presentation. May I introduce Arnold Greenberg.
Thank you. I'm going to read a poem and tell a story. This is a poem I wrote just at the beginning of, before we started the school. And I've been working on a book of poems based on the myth of Sisyphus. You know, there's a person who pushed a rock up the hill, only have it fall down. It's not unlike starting a school. Anyway, the poem is called School, and it expresses a lot of the philosophy of the school. Our teacher handed us some seeds and said, "Go plant these in your yard and water them. Then let your questions grow with every leaf." He hardly spoke except to ask, "What's on our minds?" And when we didn't say a word, he'd shake his head and say, "Well, that's too bad. We've nothing to discuss." And then he'd sit down on a rock and look up at the sky or at the dirt and think. One day we asked him why he wouldn't teach, and he replied, "I am." "What do you mean?" we asked. And when he said, "I gave you seeds to plant, and every day I ask what's on your mind, and now I'm waiting patiently for you to learn. Your teacher is inside of you. I'm just a friend with questions of my own. But if you asked what's on my mind, I'd have so many thoughts to share. We'd talk all day if I believed you cared, and only then." That's when our school began. Our gardens grew, and leaf by leaf our questions bloomed. And when he asked what's on our minds, he'd have to say, "Slow down, there's so much to discuss and do. Let's find a way to turn this flood into deep pools where we can dive and not be swept away." And when we did, he stepped aside and said, "Now swim." I can't say now how many years ago I learned from him that school was in my head, and there were gardens everywhere, and pools where I could sit all night with frogs and croak my questions at the moon and then dive in. That's a lot about the philosophy of our school, Liberty School, a democratic learning community, is it's question-oriented. What are your questions? The school is built on a motto by Emerson, which is, "The secret of education lies in respecting the pupil." And another quote by Socrates, who said, "Let the questions be the curriculum," which is basically the philosophy of that poem. And another thing is a cartoon that I once saw, which is meant to be a criticism of this type of school, progressive schools, democratic schools. And in the cartoon, a little girl goes up to the teacher and says, "Do I really have to do what I want to today?" And our response is yes, you have to do what you want to today and every day and begin determining your goals rather than following preconceived goals or curriculums. And that's what our school is about, is helping students determine their goals. What do you want to learn? What are you passionate about? Here's the opportunity to follow your spirit, your dreams. What do you want to learn? We are centered around two other questions. What does it really mean to be an educated person today as we approach the 21st century? And more important, what does it mean to be human as we live in an increasingly technological, computerized world? We call ourselves a democratic learning community. How do we practice democracy? I have a little reverb here. How do we become a democratic community? What does it mean to be a democratic learning community? And most important, what does it mean to be a community? It's one thing to say you're a community, but how do you become a community? What are the elements? What are the ingredients? We throw out a lot of words, but often they're words, and we really want to know, well, how do you become a community? In answering the question, what does it mean to be human, we also ask ourselves, what kind of graduates, what kind of students, what kind of graduates do we want our students to become? It's a question that Daria asked in her thing. What do we want? What are our goals? And we just sit around just thinking, well, what do we want our graduates to be? What qualities do we want them to possess when they graduate? And it was not an easy question. Some of the things we came up with were we wanted students to be joyful learners, lifelong learners, advocates for themselves, people who would take a stand, caring citizens of the world. So, well, how would we achieve that? And one of the things is because we were a grassroots school, and that's part of the story I'm going to tell, is how this little grassroots school started with no money, no land, no building, nothing, just a dream. But one of the things was, well, we should have teachers who have those qualities. So in looking for teachers, and the students were all involved in hiring all the teachers, we looked for people who had the qualities that we wanted our students to have. Exciting, passionate, joyful learners. In fact, we hardly even refer to our teachers as teachers. We refer to them as older students. I consider myself an older student working with younger students, and that's the only difference. I was a baker in Blue Hill, Maine, had a cafe. I had been an educator, had started a couple other schools before this, and decided I wanted to take a chapter in our story of life and get back into education after 12 years as a baker. I loved my years as a baker. I considered the cafe another version of a school. The word school, by the way, I don't know if people know that the word school in the Greek means play and leisure. To have the leisure for discourse and dialogue and to share ideas. And I remember when I was in college in the cafeteria where students were sitting around the table and we were just having great conversations. And I often felt my education was being interrupted to go to class because I was learning so much. So I said, one day if I ever started a school, I'd have 2 buildings, a library and a cafeteria. And so I considered the cafe just another version of a school. And we had some of the major folk artists and jazz musicians come to that cafe. I considered it a way station along the road where roving troubadours came and shared their stories and their songs of their heart and taught and healed through having people sing. And great discussions took place in the cafe all the time. So that was just a version, another kind of school that just happened to be a cafe. And one of my favorite words is muddle. To muddle, to flounder, to grope, to search. If we live planned, prescribed lives, which most people do, they go to high school and they go to college and they get their 2.5 children and they don't really muddle. Their life is planned out. And I have been a muddler. I don't know what the next step is going to be, but I somehow just believe with all my heart that whatever is meant to happen will happen. And that's how this school started. I just want to say one other thing before I tell the story of the school, and then I really want to open it up for questions. I really don't like being, you ever heard the sage on the stage? I don't like that. But if you think of life as the story of our life, the book of life, as being made up of many chapters, then a very good story, a very exciting book of life would be one that has a beginning, a muddle, and an end. And that's my story, as I'm right in the muddle right now of my life. I love it. How do you start a school after being a baker with no money, no land, no students, no teachers, nothing, just an idea? And I just want to talk about this evolution because I think it can help a lot of people if you believe in something and are willing to muddle. Great things can happen. So I just started around the cafe before I sold it. After I sold it, actually, almost a couple months after I sold it, I called a group of people together and I was thinking we could use another school in this town. Maine has an opportunity is in towns that have a high school, the kids have to go to that high school. But there are many, many towns in Maine that do not have high schools, and the towns pay the tuition to send them to any school that they want. So we've had school choice to some degree for 150 years. There was already an existing school in our town called George Stevens Academy, a very successful, very prestigious school, the school that all the kids went to. Their parents went to it, their uncles and aunts, and everybody just dreamed of going to this traditional high school, which is a very good traditional school. And I said, well, there may be room for another kind of school in the town. And I resist calling, I don't like the word alternative school. I resist calling it alternative because the town had a Montessori school, elementary school, had a Waldorf school, had a Christian school. They're all alternatives. So right from the beginning, I called this a democratic school. And it wasn't a word that people were familiar with, but gradually they would become familiar with it by just saying what it is. Or sometimes a non-traditional school. So I gathered people around, and so we were thinking about starting a school, and I talked about what my vision was. Of course, people asked, where are you going to get the students? Where are you going to get the money? Where are you going to get the land? Where's the school going to be? And I said, not to worry. There's no worry. It will happen. If it's meant to be, it's a statement of Marx. If there's nothing more powerful than the right idea at the right time. Nothing more powerful. So I said, we'll put an article in the paper that we're going to have a meeting at the Congregational Church for anybody interested in hearing about this idea of a school. And I expected maybe 20 people would come to this meeting. We just started in September and then had the first meeting in October. And almost 100 people came to that meeting. And I wrote up some material about the school, what it would look like, and seemed to be interested. And then I had another meeting, and then started having meetings in all the little towns, inviting people to come, and continually asked, where's the money going to come from? How are you going to have a school? Where is it going to be? I said, well, we don't have a location yet. This is just an idea. Well, people said, I'd like to be a part of this school. Students and parents started coming to meetings and signing up for a school that didn't exist. Asking, well, where is it going to be? I said, well, let's just start having meetings. It started off, there may be 6 students. And I invited the students to all the meetings and planning the school. So the kids who were aboard were involved in the starting the school right from the beginning. And gradually there were 12 students and 15, and we eventually opened with almost 40 students. But people still wanted to know, and I was going out giving talks to rooms like this, and people were asking, well, where's it going to be? How can we sign up for a school or go to a school? So there's a great deal of uncertainty. I just said, there'll be land, everything will come. Don't worry. And no, it sounded flaky and sounded out there, but that's what I said. But we just started putting out the energy of looking for a land, looking for a place. We knew we wanted to be kind of in the center of Blue Hill, so that for school buses and making it accessible. The other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to be a school that was approved by the state in order to get tuition. So this would be a public school. We were going to be competing with this already prestigious school that was in town. And of course, one of the questions people asked us is, why is there a need for another school? People at George Stevens were really angry at us and really wanted us to go away because we were a threat to them. If we got 40 students or 50 students, that meant $60,000 to $80,000 would not be going to that school, would be coming to our school. So we were offering competition. In March, the school was going to open in September. We were going to open up in September. We were going to be an approved school, and we were going to have everything ready by September. And this was March, and we still didn't have land. And I can say I never worry 1 minute. I said, worry stops the process of things happening. It means that you really don't believe. You must not. If you really believe in something, then you can't worry. Doesn't mean you can't be concerned, but you work every day towards making it happen without worrying, with absolute, complete faith that it will happen. In March, I got a phone call from a man who was interested in the school, interested in ideas, highly skeptical that this could happen. And I said, I'm not. He said, I'll tell you what. He knew we were interested in a particular area. He says, I just bought a property yesterday. 4 acres. It has a house on it and a carriage house. I'll give you an option on the land for nothing. And if the school comes to be, I'll sell you the land for what we paid for it. I paid for it. And if not, I have my land back and I can sell it or do something else with it. So we were able to say in the newspapers, Liberty School has site on South Street. That gave us some credibility. People said, well, this dreamy idea is getting someplace. He also said, I'll contribute $25,000 on the condition that you get 2 other people to contribute $25,000. So I arranged to have a party at a friend's house who happens to be Noel Paul Stuckey from Peter, Paul and Mary. He's a friend of mine and he lives in the town and a very exciting, nice man. So we had the party at their house and just invited a bunch of people to come hear about the school, tell them where we are and what we need. And within 2 weeks, I had the other $50,000 to get the 75, and just started calling people and going to people's house and trying to raise money. Well, another thing happened that is very exciting, and I would like everybody to know about this. With the movement of charter schools and schools coming into being, people wanting to start their own schools all over the country, there are now companies coming into business to build schools for charter schools. So in January, this is before we had the site, this guy called me from Boston and said, I hear you're interested in starting a school. I said, well, we're in the business of raising money for schools like yours, though it's not a charter school. Maine doesn't have charter schools, but schools like yours. We have an allied company who builds fabricated modular buildings, and maybe I think we can help you. There's another example where something came. I didn't seek it, it came. And so we started talking and meeting and working out things, and eventually doing a lot of proposals and figuring out how to go about this. We had to raise some money to pay them for their services and time. But by June, they had raised $240,000 on our behalf, and we already started working with this company, assuming that we get it, designing the building. And the students were involved in the designing of this building. We were still having our Liberty School was going on, even though we didn't have a building. We were meeting at the library. We were meeting on the grass outside the library. We were meeting, and then in March or April, when we got this building, we started meeting at the site in the house that had no furniture. So we just sat on the floor, and I kept referring to the students and the parents as the pioneers. We're the pioneers. We're starting this grassroots school. So they came, and we would be drawing sketches of the building of what we wanted, then taking it back to this company and seeing what was possible. And then we had to take our plans and go to and with students, go to the fire marshal, go to the planning board. We had finally had our design of a building. And more and more people showing interest in the school. We started going to the planning board with our plans in July. School's going to open in September. Nothing has been done on the grounds or the land for this building. Meanwhile, the building is being built in New Hampshire, hoping that we would be able to get through the planning board and put it up. There were delays with the planning board, a lot of political opposition to the school because we were a threat to the existing school. But we were persevering and we were doing everything, I have to say, with dignity, with patience, never getting upset, just following the procedure, doing the politics in a way that the state didn't know how to deal with us because we were a non-traditional school. But we tried doing everything according to what the state wanted. We presented our curriculum, which is interesting. The kinds of courses we were offering, the way we were offering them, and in the way we did not compromise in any way. We were going to emphasize the philosophy of the school. Well, the educators who reviewed our curriculum and things thought we were on the cutting edge of what Maine wants. This is the kind of school that Maine would like to have, but the politics keep it hard. They still don't want to give up the traditional model to leap into the kind of school that we were becoming. Various delays. We did not close on the property with the bank because of planning board delays until August 19th. School was scheduled to open on September 19th with a building ready for the state to come and inspect. Nobody believed we would be able to do it except me. And I convinced the students and other people that everything's fine, everything is going to work out. School opened on September 19th. The building was up and ready for inspection, except for a few things on the handicapped access thing, and the septic system wasn't quite finished. But kids came to school, the state came, and we did not get approved by the state then because the septic system wasn't connected. And this building came with all the fire alarm systems and blackboards and carpets. I came in a crane on a truck in 4 sections, and there were newspapers there taking pictures of the school coming to town. And everybody was watching us. Are they going to pull this off? How are they ever going to open up on time? It was very dramatic. I mean, the newspapers, the television, everybody was watching this happen. Kids were being interviewed. I was being interviewed. Nobody could believe this was going to happen. And it did. And finally, school opened. And we were ready for the next chapter of becoming a school, a democratic learning community. And one thing I learned that kids coming from a more traditional school to a school like Liberty School, everybody starts off strong. This is great. We're going to be responsible. We're going to be disciplined. We're going to be anything. And by the 5th or 6th week, because we have an open campus, nobody telling them to be at class, there's no bells ringing, they have really complete freedom to manage their time. And I believe that the open campus and the lack of bells and this is probably the most important part of the curriculum. That is the curriculum, learning how to go from a place where people are told what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, to a place where kids are really determining their own goals and managing their time and being responsible for what happens to them. And that process, which I call a period of disintegration, students sometimes start to really become lax. The first time they've had the chance to breathe and start maybe not getting credit for courses or not showing up. Although most of the kids did. I would say there was a small percentage, a good percentage of students who didn't, but I expect it. I expect that students coming to a school like this are going to go through what I also call the unlearning process. You have to go through an unlearning process before you can really start to believe. Sometimes students have to hit rock bottom and feel they are wasting their time. They have to really feel the discomfort of wasting their time before they really want to start using their time in a way that is meaningful for them. And so the school is very supportive of these students. We're loving, caring, and there's no punishment or anything for not coming to class, except just telling them you're probably not going to get credit for this course, and that's it. And then they don't get credit for the course, and they feel, well, what am I going to do about this? How am I going to get my act together so I can start getting credit for the course? An important ingredient in the school is that students know that they have to have a certain number of credits in each area, English, math, science, to meet the minimum requirements of the state. We let them know what those requirements are, and they have to get credit, a certain number of credits. And we're flexible in how they meet those requirements, but they still have to do substantial work and do what they say they're going to do to get credit. In fact, I often thought that I would love to have a motto over the school. You know how schools have an insignia over the arch of the school? And my motto would have been, talk is cheap. Because kids will say what they're going to do, and for me, it's only what you do that counts. You do what you do. Great idea. Go ahead, see me in 2 weeks and I'll be able to help you. And they come back in 2 weeks with nothing. I said, well, I thought you said you were going to do something. I'm here waiting to help you. But the only things that become a part of their official school record are the things they get credit for. No credits don't exist. They can go through a whole term and not get credit for anything, but it doesn't show on any official record. All it means is that they know that next time they have to make up these credits if they want to graduate on time. So they do whatever they have to do to make up for the time that they, quote, wasted. I don't consider it a waste of time if they were starting to get some insight into themselves. So that's part of the credit system. Students get written evaluations, right, self-evaluations. At the end of each term, however, more important than the evaluations and the courses, they make exhibitions to the whole school. Every class presents something to the whole school at the end of each term. And now we're moving that the exhibitions, the students won't even get an evaluation for the course until after they've presented their exhibition. Their presentation is a very important part. The other thing we emphasize in our classes is being a team and collaborating. If in the future, from what we gather from industry and corporate world and businesses and people, that they want people who are problem solvers, people who can work as teams, people that can collaborate. And that's the way we run our classes. Our classes are teams. And I like to compare an academic team class to a basketball team or a football team or a drama club, where everybody is collaborating to make the team be successful. Everybody has to do their best on a basketball team to make the team win games and be successful. So the same kind of quality that teammates on a basketball team expect of each other, showing up for practice, being prepared, doing everything possible to make the team successful, is what we do in our classes. How are you contributing to the class to make it a successful class? It's not the teacher's class, it's our class. We're not doing things for the teacher, we're doing things for each other. We each need each other. And the school, the democratic part of the school is, and it really truly is a democracy, is that part of community service, there's two community service elements. One, community service outside of school, in some hospital or library or school or thing. But community service, kids have to get a certain number of credits for community service within the school. And so the school is really run by all these committees: admissions committee, a curriculum committee, a judicial committee. And the school is actually run not by me, but by a community council that's made up of, this year, this term, it's but 10 students and 3 teachers. And they are the collective principal of the school. They set the agenda for the all-school meetings. They work with the budget. Committees report to them once a week. We meet 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Monday, they set the agenda for the all-school meeting, what issues are going to be discussed, whether there should be allowed to be video games on the computers, how the library should be used, how the kitchen should be used, should we buy a vacuum cleaner, everything. Kids make the agenda. On Tuesdays, we have an advisory meeting. Each student has an advisor, and they meet as an advisory. And they get the agenda from the community council to discuss in the advisory as a small group on Tuesdays, to discuss in the larger group on Thursdays at an all-school meeting, which we have. And these all-school meetings are very exciting. I love them, and the dialogue that goes on and the discussions are really rich. There's one other thing I'm going to say about the school, and then I'd really like to open it up for questions. School has very few requirements except the minimum requirements of the state. Has no rules except the federal and state laws of no drugs, alcohol, or smoking, and that's enforced by the Judicial Committee. We don't have any rules about it, but we have a civil rights team that is made up of a teacher and students, because we really don't want harassment, not just sexual harassment, but we really are working on how can we become a kind community? How can we really stop the tendency of kids to bust on each other and call names and things and treat each other with respect? That's part of becoming a community. But we now have really the only requirement in the school, other than the community service requirement, that is a graduation requirement. Students have to petition the graduation committee, which is made up of students and teachers, petition to graduate. We don't call it seniors. Any student who thinks they're ready to graduate can petition the graduation committee and say, I think I'm ready to graduate. All students have to do a graduation project, which is like a dissertation. That is either in written or presentation form or art form, any form. We really do a lot around multiple intelligence. We find there are many, we try to really respect different ways of learning. So we don't require papers as the only way of demonstrating your knowledge, and we really like students to have the practice of presenting things to people. So students have to petition the graduating committee by getting a letter from their advisor saying that they have met the minimum requirements of the state, and I think this person is ready to graduate or not ready to graduate. And they have to have a mentor and talk about what their graduation project is going to be, and it has to be around an essential question. So they really have to learn to articulate a significant, essential question, and most of them didn't even know what an essential question meant. And so they're coming up with that, and kids are doing some very exciting projects. And the final thing I just want to say about the school that I think is unique and I really love is every student gets a handmade diploma made by the other students in the school and teachers. We start working on them in February. And they get a diploma about the size of this that says, know all by these present that so-and-so for wearing the baggiest pants in the history of the school for this project, or that's something that's really unique and special to that person. And that's the graduation ceremony. These diplomas are read. The students are celebrated. They're also celebrated by the fact that they have to present their graduation project, not only to the graduation committee for its approval, but to the whole school. It will be open in the evening and days, and every student will be celebrated by their having the opportunity to present something that they worked on. And the graduation project is an attempt that they have to demonstrate that they have mastered and understand the kind of skills and dispositions that we want Liberty School students to have. So they get a little tiny rolled up diploma that shows that's their certificate that looks like it comes from the state, plus the Liberty School diploma. And there was one student last year, for instance, who was a musician and singer, and her diploma was shaped like a guitar. Other students are shaped, so they're very personalized, and the graduations are just very, very moving. I'd just like to open up for questions. I talked about the starting of the school. There might be some questions about that. And Daria?